This is the new Grey Dial variant of the Omega Railmaster. If this watch seems familiar to you, well, you're not mistaken. It's basically an Aqua Terra with no date. Slight differences here or there that we'll get into later on in the video, but for the most part, it's just an extension of the Aqua Terra line, which can be a good or bad thing depending on if you like the Aqua Terra. And at first, I really didn't like the way this watch looked. I thought it was just a very basic version of something that we've seen before, but the more time I spent with it, the more I actually got an appreciation for it and understood where it fits in Omega's lineup. But first, let me thank my friends over at Martin Binder for letting me borrow this watch. They are authorized dealers for Omega and also Tudor, Hamilton, Tissot, and many other brands. So I'm going to go ahead and leave a link down in my description box to their website. And if you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe buttons as well. It really does help the channel. Now let's flip that camera and get into the specs. We have a case diameter of 38 millimeters, a lug to lug of 44.9 millimeters, a thickness of 12.4 millimeters, a lug width of 19 millimeters. On the full bracelet, it weighs in at 135 grams. It has water resistance of 150 meters, a domed sapphire crystal with AR coating on the top and on the bottom. Powering this watch is the Omega Caliber 8806, which is the dateless version of the 8800 series, and the MSRP of this watch is $5,800. Now, like I said, this is a no-nonsense watch. There are no applied indices, no applied logo. Everything is printed on the dial in a crisp white font, and I think it works well with the gradient gray color scheme here. So above the hand stack, we have the Omega logo. Below the hand stack, we have the name of the watch, Railmaster, with no other markings on it. So it doesn't say automatic, it doesn't give its water resistance, which I think gives the watch a very clean and utilitarian aesthetic. In the classic Railmaster setup, we have the 12, 3, 6, and 9, as well as triangular indices throughout, and a printed on minute track. The handset included with the Railmaster is something very similar to the Aqua Terra. We have a sword minute hand, a broad arrow hour hand, and an arrow seconds hand. They also have a gradient brown dial version with a sub-second hand right above the 6 o'clock index, which gives off more of a vintage look as compared to this gray dial. We have a multi-finish on the case with brushing on the top and on the sides, and polished lyre lugs, as well as a polished bezel. At the 3 o'clock, we have a screw-down crown that has the Omega logo and no crown guards. Flipping this watch to the back, we can see the classic Omega exhibition case back that shows off the 8806 movement. Moving on to the 3-link presidential style bracelet, there is brushing and polishing on it as well, with the outer links being brushed and the center links being polished. It tapers from 19 millimeters down to 17 millimeters at that butterfly clasp, which does have a slight 2 millimeter micro adjustment. This is basically the same bracelet that is on the black lacquer Aqua Terra that I just reviewed. So if you haven't seen that review, go ahead and click up there and watch it after you watch this review. This version of the Railmaster really doesn't take that many risks. It's basically an Aqua Terra with just some subtle tweaks to make it a little bit more utilitarian, which I guess is a good thing and maybe a bad thing if you think about it. We'll get into that in the pros and cons section, but if you've seen an Aqua Terra, you've held an Aqua Terra, it's gonna be basically the same watch, just in a little different package. All right, so now that we took a closer look, let's go ahead and get into the pros and cons before I give you guys my final thoughts. And we'll start off with the cons, with the first con being how similar this is to the Aqua Terra. It's basically the same watch, only turned down a little bit, if that makes sense. There are no applied indices or an applied logo. It's just a very basic offering here, which is not a bad thing, but it just looks too similar to the Aqua Terra. And this is not the first time Omega has made the Railmaster, so I don't know why they decided to make something that looks so similar to what they currently have on offer. Like when it comes to the handset, they use a broad arrow minute hand here, where I think the Railmaster should have a broad arrow hour hand. That would separate it a little bit more and give it this watch its own individual personality. And if Omega wanted to make this more of a tool watch, they could have added a different clasp, a fold-over clasp, to make it a little bit less elegant and a little bit more rugged. They could have used the clasp that's on the Ultra Deep, that fold-over clasp with a micro adjustment that looks more rugged but also has a lot of utility. The Aqua Terra, yeah, that's more of a dressy everyday piece. This is the piece that you're supposed to use as a tool watch, so make make it into a tool watch. They're trying to make this watch too similar to the Aqua Terra, and I think that's a detriment to the identity of the Railmaster. And I think that's going to be the biggest con here, is that it just looks too similar to the Aqua Terra. I've said Aqua Terra like 10 times in this review already. It's just too similar a watch, and that's the biggest downfall of the Railmaster. But that's not to say this watch is bad by any means. I actually like this watch more now than I did when the Omega first revealed it. There's something about having a luxury tool watch that really appeals to me, and I'm actually considering buying this watch. It's crazy to say, but I'm actually considering buying this watch, even though it does look like an Aqua Terra. I mean, it does have pros, with the first pro being how well this watch wore on my wrist. I was surprised. I thought 38 millimeters was going to be too small, but this watch on my wrist, I think it looks great. I think it has a well-balanced stance, and even though 38 millimeters may seem small to some, I really recommend trying it on, because I would not have thought a 38 millimeter would have looked this good on my wrist, but I think it works here, and I'm not sure if it's the dial size or maybe it's the lyre lugs that give it a more broad stance, but I really think it works well here, even though it's 38 millimeters. And while it does have a familiar look, having those crisp white indices on that beautiful gradient gray dial works in combination with one another. I think it offers a very simple yet clean look overall. Now, one positive of having everything printed on the dial is that the lume here is second to none, and thanks to that super luminova, it rivals the brightness out of any watch in my collection, even my Seamaster. And you get this entire package for $5,800 or $5,300 if you get it on the leather strap, which is a large sum of money, but this is the entry point into the Omega brand. And luckily it is cheaper than the Seamaster, barely, but it is cheaper. So there it is, the Omega Railmaster. Now this watch is not without its faults, but the biggest issue with this watch is that it looks too similar to another watch. It's not the Railmaster itself that I have an issue with. I have an issue with it looking too similar to something else that's being offered in the same collection. But it does separate itself just enough. We have a very clean and simple layout. No date, no applied indices, no applied logo. Just a pure tool watch. The finishing on the case and on the bracelet and how everything operates is exactly what you would expect from Omega. Not to mention that movement is a workhorse. It's going to be accurate. It's going to last you a lifetime. So that's not the issue I have with this watch. My issue with this watch isn't that it's bad. It's that it doesn't have its own identity. It plays it too safe. They should have kept the broad arrow hour hand. They could have put on a closed case back with a special engraving. They could have added a fold-over clasp or just changed the bracelet entirely. And once again, it's not to say that the watch is bad. On its own, the watch is great. I really like the way it looks, but it's just so similar to the Aqua Terra line, I just can't overlook it. And if that's something that you're fine with, by all means, go ahead and pull the trigger on the Railmaster. You're not going to be disappointed with what you purchase. I just wish they would have given the Railmaster its due and just put a little bit more thought into the design overall. But what do you guys think? Am I crazy? Let me know in the comment section down below if I'm just overreacting when it comes to the Railmaster. Once again, thank you to my friends over at Martin Binder for letting me borrow this watch. I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to their website in my description box. And if you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really does help the channel. And if you're still here, why don't you go ahead and check out my Aqua Terra review. And then you can compare them and see if I'm going crazy. Go ahead, click it right there. I go more detail about the bracelet and stuff. So go ahead and click right there. Click it. Go. Click it now. Go. Now. Go.